Hey, good morning, Barney. How are
Good
you?
morning, Tom. Good. How are you?
Hey, it is peak tax season, man. So I know you're real busy. So thanks again for joining. And boy, I think this is video number 7, this final one of the series.
It flies by.
I know it's true, and it's been a lot of fun. We've covered a lot of ground, talked about a lot of valuable things. And hey, man, you're the keynote speaker and expert. So thanks for tagging along this whole time.
Thank you. But you really put it all together, and you do summarize, I think, tax resolution as best as anyone.
Good. I appreciate that. So, for everybody watching, we are at the tail end of this series, and like I just mentioned to Barney, we've covered a lot of ground. And so, just a quick recap. For anybody who may be watching this video first for whatever reason on the YouTube page, something like that, would highly recommend you go back to the beginning. Right. We work pretty chronologically with what we've been discussing today. It's kind of a culmination of everything we've talked about, and you're probably not going to get much out of what we're talking about today. There's a lot of value today, but in terms of the fundamentals, you're probably going to be pretty confused. So, pause it, go back and watch the others, and you should be in good shape. So, just as a reminder for everybody, though, up to this point, we've gone through and talked about ATBS as a proven process to get out of debt with the IRS throughout this series, and it's really simple. I'll remind you anyway. Number one, you got to get compliant. We talked about that in episode 2. If you do nothing but watch episode 2 of this series, I don't know what Star Wars movie that correlates with, but it probably was a good one. Um, go back and watch that one and forget the rest. I mean, if you only have time to watch one of these, because nothing matters until you watch or understand how to get compliant with the IRS. Negotiations won't happen. Everything that we've been working on means nothing if you don't get caught up. Episode 3 was where we talked broadly about what happens in a negotiation with the IRS. So, pretty high level stuff, but people just have a lot of questions about what happens. What does it look like? What are the steps involved? How do you prepare? What happens on the call? What do you do afterward? So it's good. The fourth episode was managing your compliance, which honestly is the hardest part of all this, because it requires you managing your IRS compliance daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly for the rest of your working life. And so it is extremely important, and a company like ATBS can do it for you, which is really what episode number 4 is about. Episode 5, we went through and got into the nitty gritty of negotiation. Barney, did a master class on some of the strategies and tactics that we and you can use to make sure that you use your time wisely with the IRS. Episode 6, which was the most recent one, we answered, I want to say, 10 of the most common questions that we tend to hear at ATBS, just related to back taxes and tax resolution in general. And I'll just come right out and say it. Most of the questions that we answered in that took care of user submitted questions that we've gotten throughout the series, but we have a couple left that we'll talk about today from our viewers that we didn't answer last week. And then today, what we're really talking about is just helping people get a grip on where they stand with their personal situation. So there's this spectrum, right, of what we consider. So let me take a step back. Everybody's situation is unique, and it's extremely important and can be really stressful for you. We understand that. What we're trying to do today is really help you understand there's this spectrum of um, the lower impact, lower intensity, all the way out to, boy, this is some pretty serious stuff, and you got to get a grip on this like yesterday. So today, what we're going to try and help people do is just get a general idea of where they're at on the spectrum. And so we're going to do that by talking about the 3 core programs that we have in our ATBS Tax Relief Pit Crew, which is managed by Barney and his team. So, we have 3 core services, and we're just going to talk about kind of the basic parameters of where people fit and how those scale up based on what's happening in your personal situation. So should be good. And really, at the end of the day today, we want to help you understand the scope of your situation and what it's going to take realistically to get out of trouble with the IRS. And so Barney and I have said it, I don't know how many times, dozens, hundreds, thousands, over the course of our time here. Everything about this is incremental. Just it's baby steps. The most important thing is to get the ball moving, because then it starts rolling down the hill, the snowball grows, and you can get this over with. But understanding how much time and effort and money it's going to take to get there is important to know up front. And so, Barney, dang, here we are. Did you have anything you wanted to start with before we start diving into this?
Well, I want to thank everyone for spending the time. Look, taxes is like going to the dentist. Um, but the trick is to get ahead of it. Like a bad tooth, you want to get ahead of it. And once you're ahead of it and you're taking care of yourself and your taxes, you're going to be happier. And that's why Tom and I come to work is we like, knowing that we're making people happier.
Totally. All right, man. So, you know what, Barney? Why don't we start with just a couple of, no, I'm going to save those questions for the end. Let's help people figure out where they're at first. So, let's start. And like I mentioned, everybody, we have three core programs that we take people through. I'll highlight them for you now so you know what we're talking about. The first one is kind of a do-it-yourself program to an extent. So, it's our turbocharged negotiation coaching. So, Barney, literally, he and his team work with you one-on-one to provide coaching on how to go to the IRS and do this negotiation process yourself entirely. It's awesome. Barney can coach you through it, provides a great how-to guide when it's all said and done to make sure you're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. Beyond that, though, we have two programs where it's ATBS led. It's an expert led program where you, the client, aren't really spending much, if any, time at all dealing with the IRS. We take that off your hands. And so we have two programs. One's called our tune-up program, where, like Barney mentioned, maybe you're starting to notice some tooth pain. Maybe you're starting to visibly see that there are issues. The pain isn't horrible yet, but you can get ahead of it. And so the reason we call it a tune-up is that we can fix your IRS engine, right, before it blows out. And so our tune-up program is kind of the middle ground where we'll talk about it. Situation is not extremely far gone, and so it's a little bit of kind of like a medium impact program. And then we have our overhaul program where in our eyes, your IRS tax engine's totally busted. And so we have to just kind of come in and rework this whole thing and start over. And so we'll talk about each one. And Barney's going to talk today about real client examples, case studies, whatever you want to talk about, call it. We're not, naming names or anything like that, but just loosely talking about what someone's situation looked like and how they fit into the program and what we did. So, when we talk about our coaching program, Barney and I have mentioned a lot that once you hit a balance due with the IRS of 50 grand or more, we highly recommend letting an expert do it for you because you start going deep into the underbelly of the IRS. Me personally, you start getting into that underbelly once you hit 25 grand, really. So, but for the purposes of keeping us in line with what we've talked about in the series, if you are completely caught up, so you're compliant, right? So your taxes are filed, you're on time with your quarterly payments. The IRS is willing to speak with you. And if your balance is below 50 grand, if you are comfortable doing so, if it doesn't, cause you to lose too much sleep at night trying to deal with it yourself, our negotiation coaching program could be a great fit for you. And so, Barney, if you would love to hear about maybe a client situation you've worked with just, in recent days, weeks, so we could help our viewers get an idea of do I fit into that bucket or not?
You got it. And I'm actually going to share two stories
Okay.
where they had similar situations, but because of the way it was stressing one of the truckers out, how we handled it a little differently. Because so we basically have three general categories in the patterns we see with truckers, and we're only sharing that to help you find out where you may fit in.
Right.
Your story is unique, and that's why I want to share these two stories of the same taxes roughly due and where they were, but why the stress level was a factor in how we approached it. So
Sure.
my first trucker, I'm going to call her Jane Turbocharge. Jane had been an independent contractor prior to getting into trucking. So she had some familiarity with when you get paid as a 1099, you're supposed to make estimated payments.
Got it.
She still didn't do it. And it was her first year getting into trucking. And she came to ATVS to do the tax return. And she was really good for a first year trucker. She actually turned a pretty good profit of between 30 and 40,000. But the problem was she had made no estimated payments.
Mm,
And when we completed the return, um, she didn't have a ton of expenses and she owed about $8,000.
got it.
So in Jane's case, she was new to trucking, but she was very comfortable with the nuts and bolts of why she owed, the estimated payments, and she really just had put her whole heart that year to learning trucking, and that's what she concentrated on, and she just didn't put any mental energy into taxes. So that was really just a coaching session. We helped her estimate her taxes. Um, we walked her through how to call the IRS and work out a payment plan. And really, that's the end of story there. It was an under $10,000 tax due. She was familiar with being an independent contractor. And just with a little guidance from us, she was able to negotiate a payment plan. And I'm also happy to report she remained a successful trucker with us and also was on top of her estimated payments moving forward.
Oh, good.
So if we have time really quick, I have a very similar
Sure.
gentleman
Got plenty of
who
time.
same story, much younger guy, had never been an independent contractor. We'll call him Jim Freightliner, and this was his first time ever being an independent contractor. He'd been a W-2 guy for, I think he was in his mid-20s, and had never owed taxes. And he was a wreck once we did his tax return. He owed 11,000. And he really was just totally stressed out.
Yeah, I'm probably just
He,
totally unprepared for it, right?
yeah,
I
and
mean, just didn't
11,000 is a
understand.
lot of money. Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
Um, we did the coaching. He understood it, but he also, and look, we see this and we understand it. He really did not want to talk to the IRS. He had
Right.
a fear of the IRS, and I understand that. And if we've gone over everything and the trucker still says, please represent me, please do it. We do. And we engaged the IRS. Um, they were actually threatening a levy at that point. We were able to get the levy threat removed. We got him into an affordable payment plan. And the other great thing is he stayed with us as well. And we monitor his income and expenses. ATBS has the best estimate reporting software in the country for truckers. That's part of our service.
Yep.
And we were able to keep them in line and compliant moving forward, which is really, as Tom's always hammering, the goal. But here's an example of two different truckers, two set of expectations, similar one-time filing, first time as a trucker, owing some tax, but the stress level for one trucker, made it reasonable for us to take over and negotiate for him. The stress level for the woman that was new but knew about being independent, she was able to basically drive herself with just a little help from us.
Yeah, and I mean, a big takeaway that we'll talk about, we've already said every situation is unique. And so we are unafraid of putting people in the program that obviously is the best fit for what we think for their situation, but based on their stress level and their comfort level too. We might have somebody who, shoot, owes 150 grand and is more than happy to talk to the IRS, on their own behalf. Wouldn't recommend it, but if that's really what they want to do, we'll work with them on it. But at the same time, we might have somebody who owes 2,500 bucks, which isn't a small sum of money, but in the grand scheme of what we deal with every day, it's a pretty small amount of money. And we would just recommend calling the IRS to deal with that, assuming you couldn't make it, or make that payment. And if somebody is really gung ho about having us do it, we'll do it for you. It's just a matter of your comfort level in line with where you're at related to this impact scale. So what I would tell everybody, those two examples from the big picture of a tax resolution standpoint, low impact. And so, if it's a real low impact, or low amount due, you can do it yourself. And so we can do that for you. It's a pretty low fee program. It's a couple $100. It's under 500 bucks today for us to do that. And boy, I don't know if there's any tax resolution company out there that would be willing to impart that knowledge for their client to go do that work because they'd rather charge them a couple $1,000 to go do it for them, even if it was easy and they were willing to do it themselves. So HTBS is unique in that we offer this one-on-one coaching program if your situation warrants it. So again, give us a call. And if you find yourself, again, compliant, caught up, balance is under 25,000, or as we're saying today, under 50,000, could be a good option for you. Now, what we see a lot more of, because typically when people come to us with issues with the IRS, they're not compliant, right? And we talk about this all the time. So that coaching program is a good fit if somebody's all caught up and they have a balance. More often than not, people come to us and they're behind on their taxes. And so 95% of what we do is in our tune-up or our overhaul program. So our tune-up program, loosely, is if you have 1 or 2 years of taxes that need to be filed. Again, your tax engine hasn't kind of blown up yet. You got 1 or 2 years, it's manageable, and your balance by the time they're done is 50 grand or more. We recommend our tune-up program. And so, Barney, can you think of anybody we've done work with recently? I know we do a lot of this, and so hopefully we have some recent examples or an example we can talk about.
You mean the kind of the middle tier where it's like under 3 returns?
Yeah, 1 or 2 returns and then a pretty significant balance due that you have to go to bat for the client and negotiate for.
Right. So really, let's just build on either of the 2 examples we have before, but I do have another trucker. He's actually an older gentleman, and his name is Bob. And Bob, we had the conversation with the estimated payment plan on his first year that he owed, and he was making payments, but he did not keep up with the payments.
Got it.
And then when he filed his second year as an independent contractor, and he was, again, a good trucker, he was making money. But of course, in the tax world, it's the opposite of your life. The more success and better year you have out in the world financially, the tougher your tax world is.
It's
And the
true.
opposite, the more loss you have and the less money you make, then you owe less taxes. Bob is a good driver. He was making money, but the first payment plan on his first year, he fell behind. He then filed his second return. He was running hard, making good money, and he owed an additional amount. And he really just avoided it. He didn't make any payments on the second year.
Got it.
Um, and then when it came time to do the third year, he was cracking the $50,000 amount, which we do kind of set as a flag
Right.
where, and we're not just making that up. So when you call the IRS, there's actually a couple of tiers of debt. Just about any agent you speak to at the IRS can negotiate with you if you owe under 25,000. They have permission and the rights to negotiate with taxpayers under 25,000. So that's a line.
Yep.
Um, Once you owe more than 25, they'll say, I need to transfer you, I'm not authorized. And you move to basically the 25,000 and up group. And then there's another group for over 50,000. So Bob had just crossed into the 50,000 due. And that's when he asked us, look, I really do want to get a control of this before it really spins out of control. And in Bob's case, there is a key thing to know here. When the IRS says, hey, you owe, and in Bob's case, he owed $53,900, it's important to dig into what you owe and have them separate out your total balance due with what your assessed balance due is. What's the
Right.
difference? The assessed balance is if you just pull your tax returns and you look at the tax before penalties and interest that are due for each year, that's your assessed tax. That's just the tax you owed. The penalties and interest are what the IRS does to us when we don't pay the total taxes due and or we file late. So they charge penalties for filing late, and they charge interest on any taxes that were unpaid.
Got it.
But the reason this is an important distinction is if you can show that your balance on assessed tax is under 50,000, you can actually pull back from the over 50,000 negotiation and negotiate the easier terms under 50. And a lot of people don't know
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's a big deal. And that's what we were able to do with Bob. We were able to determine that he was actually just under 50. Yes, he was just under 50,000. And because of that, we were able to move to, it's called Streamline Installment Agreement. It's less invasive, less financials are required.
Hmm.
And of course, when we negotiated the payment plan for Bob, we also did really go over with him how to stay in the program, stay compliant,
Right.
so the payment plan that we arranged for him stayed active and wasn't terminated.
Yep. And what I would tell everybody, because Barney just hit it on the head, each level of our service gets more intensive, but each level of our service includes amazing coaching from Barney and the pit crew, the tax relief pit crew, just to say, hey, you know, our first program is just coaching you how to do this yourself. The next program up, if we have to do this work for you, we're still going to coach you on exactly what's happening, and we're going to coach you how to stay out of trouble, how to stay out of trouble down the line too. So, my takeaway, Barney, is that our tune-up service is really built for anybody who, one, is uncomfortable talking to the IRS, really regardless of whether the balance is under 50 grand or over 50 grand. If it's too stressful for you, it that money is very worth spending just so that you can keep your sanity, right? um, but it's also specifically for anybody whose balance due is 50 grand or more, just because, like we said, it becomes much more difficult to negotiate, and you want an expert to be able to do that, to make sure those IRS pit bulls are being handled by somebody who knows how to avoid getting beat up too bad by them. So that's really who that program's for. Really, anytime that you just need somebody to go to bat for you from a negotiation standpoint, our tune-up program is really what it's designed to be for. Most companies out there are going to charge, boy, from my research these days in early 2021, just to go do the negotiation, put a power of attorney on file, we're talking probably 5 grand most of the time from an average standpoint. It's a lot of money. ATBS, this program in general, is considerably more affordable, especially for our drivers. Program is usually right around or under the $1,500 mark. And I know it's kind of a scary number. $1,500 is a lot of money. But we at ATBS, one of our virtues at ATBS is frugality. So we're always trying to do as much as we can, be as valuable as we possibly can for the least amount of money possible for our clients, because we know that our clients are constrained financially too. So I promise you, our fees are designed and built in a way that we're able to provide the maximum value for the smallest amount of money for what we do. So Barney, that leads us into overhaul, our IRS or our tax overhaul program. So, generally the way that I look at the overhaul is almost more on the compliance side. If you're 3 or more years behind on just filing your taxes, your tax engine really needs to be rebuilt, because there is just a ton of work that has to be done just to get you caught up on that side of things from a compliance standpoint. But our overhaul program today, is designed to help people, and Barney's talked about it, handle a bulk return request with the IRS in an attempt to wipe out some of the interest, fees, and penalties before Barney even has to go to bat for you from the negotiation standpoint. So it's a more expensive program, but it's much more intensive with what we do across the board. So Barney, I know you do a ton of these today, and if you can pinpoint just one or two examples, I think it would help people understand, what this overhaul program is really about.
Okay, so again, just like I talked about two examples in the first year IO tax due,
Yep.
I am going to kind of discuss two ranges in I've got multiple years, 4, 5, 6, 20 tax returns that I have not filed or I owe on. I'm going to the extreme example, and we've got them. We have truckers that come to us and they haven't filed their tax return in 20 years. And And in a lot of those cases, if those truckers were getting 1099s reported in their name to the IRS actually went ahead, and for many of those years, the IRS filed tax returns for the trucker. This is really the IRS's way of being very aggressive and kind of shaking you up, because when they do it, they take the 1099 that was reported as income you received, and they tax you on that gross amount. And the whole point, of course, of filing a tax return is to say, I didn't pocket that money. I had to buy fuel, and my truck
Right.
broke down, and tax me on my net, the net that came in my pocket. And this one example, the trucker had multiple years filed by the IRS, and his balance when we called for the compliance check was $974,000.
Oh, it's awful.
Yeah. So of course, if you've listened to our earlier recordings, and invite you to go back, we talk about the offering compromise, which is a great program. What you're not going to hear from the other tax resolution companies is the IRS rejects the majority of offering compromise applications.
Right.
Here at ATBS, we only want to pursue programs that make sense, are worth the trucker's time and money to pursue. But in these extreme cases, absolutely the offer and compromise was on the table, because it was actually a pretty easy case to complete an offer and compromise that the IRS accepted, because the offer and compromise form, it's not some magical wave of the wand, give me a tax break. It's a math formula that shows the IRS after expenses how much money the trucker has left in his pocket each month versus the boatload of money the trucker owes for all those years.
Yep.
And when we can demonstrate that in an offer and compromise application, the IRS will do all those crazy promises you do hear on the radio in these ads. They will accept an offer where they allow the taxpayer to pay pennies on the dollar. It really is an available program when the math works, and that's what's critical. So, you know, the other two examples I gave, if you're listening and you fell into those examples, you might get mad hearing this, but the sad truth is, once a taxpayer is in that deep a doo-doo, there are actually programs for them. Now, please, I am not telling you to go get in big tax doo-doo.
It's not worth it.
Okay, it's not worth it. Believe me, these truckers are stressed. There's a lot of negotiation, and even with an offering compromise, they're on thin ice for the rest of their tax life. They have to comply, because the other thing you're not going to hear from any tax resolution company is these offering compromises can be undone.
Right.
Just like a payment plan, if you get a great deal from the IRS where you owed 300 grand and they agreed to 30,000, which happens all the time, you have to lockstep the rest of your life and behave, because if you are out of compliance, they will blow up the offer and compromise, and that 270,000 that we negotiated off your books of owing, they will slap it back on with penalties and interest.
Yep.
So look, I'd rather have this tough conversation with my trucker up front. Most tax resolution companies, they actually love when clients fail and have to come back and pay again.
Yeah. We've
We
talked
do
about
not
that.
enjoy that here. We consider that a failure on our part if that happens.
Right.
We want truckers to stay in touch with us. We don't want this to happen. We want to keep the IRS in their rearview mirror. So that's my extreme example for over 50,000. But really, most of my examples of this group, they owe really between 50 and 100,000.
Yep. That sounds about right.
Then the conversation is going to be, how old are you? How much
Yeah.
longer are you going to be driving as a 1099 independent contractor? Because if you're 63 and you're thinking you're gonna retire soon, we're going to probably recommend you tread water, you get as low a payment plan as you can, and not apply for the offer in compromise while you're still showing that gross 1099 money. And the reason is, again, what are the percentage odds of the IRS approving the offer in compromise? The problem is, if they see that 1099 high gross income, they're prejudiced. I've had IRS agents say to me, just pay us before he fills his gas tank. And, that makes no sense. If a
Not
trucker,
logical.
yeah, if a
Right.
trucker can't fill his gas tank, he's not paying anybody.
It's true.
Um, so this is where it does become, what's your unique situation? What do you owe? What are you showing as gross income each year? And what programs, based on your financial situation, have the best chance of being approved? There are year-to-year programs called hardship programs,
Right.
where you can apply per year for what happened in that year to get taxes reduced. We may surgically work year by year on those reductions for these types of clients.
Yeah, and so, as I'm thinking about pricing here, Barney, I realize this is probably a poor place to do it because we're not using any sort of slides and stuff like that. What I would say from a pricing standpoint for people who are wondering how much it costs to get out of trouble with the IRS, the further the further you fall behind, the more taxes you have to file, the larger your payment, the larger the balance due, the more money it costs to get out of trouble. That's just the way it is because it's just a function of labor hours. It takes time to file tax returns. It takes time to call the IRS. It takes time to build negotiation plans. So another great reason to get ahead of this and nip it in the bud if you're new to trucking or newer to trucking, get this stuff done on time, get compliant because it gets harder and harder and more complicated and more expensive as you go. And one thing I should mention as I was talking about pricing, there are fees to file your taxes. There are fees to get a power of attorney on file. There are fees for our specific program, like a tune-up or an overhaul. So, really in reality, these programs and fees can get into the several thousands of dollars, just depending upon how far behind you are. It's all worth it to get you out of trouble, right? To get you back on track. But your life is much less expensive if you get this stuff done on time with a company like ATBS. And so, my comment earlier about how much our tune-up program costs, it's probably more in the $2,000 to $3,000 range. And our overhaul and offer and compromise programs, when you add in tax returns and off, power of attorney programs and stuff like that, are even more. And so, again, when you compare our pricing, and we encourage people to do so, with other tax resolution companies out there, it's still dramatically different with the amount of value that we provide at our pricing and knowing the industry as well as we do. So, biggest thing related to pricing, as I'm looking at my notes, is best thing you can do if you're curious is just call us, because everybody's situation is different. Like we've been talking about, there's a lot of gray in between too, and just your comfort level, your stress level, how old you are. It's a very consultative process that we go through on our enrollment team and with our tax relief pit crew, Barney's program. And we just want to make sure people are getting into the program that's going to provide the most bang for their buck for what they need to get done. And at the end of the day, a lot of people may hear, oh, it's going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars to get out of trouble. I'll just do it myself, which is fine. But what we typically tell people is, not only can you buy back your time by purchasing tax resolution help, but your results will be dramatically better when you get into that 50,000 plus and you've got multiple years to file and you're getting liens and levies and all that stuff. An expert can make your money go a lot farther than most people can, because Barney literally had to go to school effectively to get to where he is today with all of his certifications, and to be an enrolled agent with the IRS. And so the man and the people in his department are extremely well trained and tenured in this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's painful to have to pay money to get out of trouble, to put the IRS in your rearview mirror, but man, it is extremely valuable and highly worth it once your situation gets complicated and once that impact starts to grow.
Just as truckers have to recertify and retrain and also learn the new technologies of the new trucks, we are constantly in classes, especially with all of the tax code changes through the pandemic. The IRS has had rule changes almost constantly over the last 12 months.
Yep.
And you just, to just even tread water on all of the tax changes, we are constantly attending classes for updates and best methods.
Yep. So, I guess my takeaway for folks listening to this is that, the lower the impact of the problem, the lower the cost to get that problem to go away, and it just scales up from there, right? But that's the reality. And so, do your due diligence, shop around, find somebody who knows trucking. There aren't many tax resolution firms out there really that know trucking, and if they do, typically it's more of, well, we've worked with truckers in the past, so we know trucking. But literally ATBS only works with truckers when we do our entire business model in general, but tax resolution as well. So this is all we do every single day. Our pricing is extremely fair, highly valuable, so give us a call. I'm very confident that we're not only going to be able to solve your problems and put the IRS in the rearview mirror forward, but we're going to do it at a price point that is extremely reasonable for the amount of time, effort, and work that goes into it. So at this point, Barney, did you have follow up related to just the scope and the scale of kind of these groupings of where people may fall into? I realized today would have been a good day for slides, but again, most people are listening to these, so I apologize. It's kind of a challenge to visualize or conceptualize what we're talking about, but hopefully we've broken out kind of the low, medium, and high priority impact situations.
Yeah, I did have one note that I just want to share with you when we're sizing up negotiating with the IRS and what your odds are. A lot of this is based on your history with the IRS.
Right.
So if it's your first time getting into issues with the IRS, the truth is it's an easier negotiation. A lot of the core issue with the IRS, whether you believe in the IRS, look, we are not cheerleaders for the IRS, but we
Right.
do want to play the game. And it's convincing the IRS that this is a small kind of detour from being a good taxpayer, and that the taxpayer, the trucker, is back on the road, the right road. But sometimes truckers don't tell me their whole history, and then I'll call the IRS to negotiate, and they were in deep doo-doo, not even in trucking, sometimes in other stuff.
Right.
And if they don't tell me that, I really need to know everything so I know how to approach it. Um, but the good news, if you're listening and you just are getting into trouble with the IRS because you're an independent contractor and you didn't know about estimated payments, which is most truckers, it's a lot easier to get a good deal
For sure.
because the IRS understands. Yeah, you moved from W-2 to independent and you just didn't understand how it works. They understand that. So just to be upfront and honest, depending on your history with the IRS, that's going to also affect how and what's possible.
Right. And so I'll just plug ATBS, monthly recurring services real quick. So, we've talked a lot about people who are getting out of trouble with the IRS, and then how to manage that compliance moving forward, which ATBS can do. But we can manage compliance from day one when someone is a new owner operator or a new independent contractor in trucking. So if you are a company driver considering a move to being your own boss in trucking, call ATBS, if and when you make the switch. Or if you're somebody who is working to get out of trouble and other people that you can envision will be in the similar situation as you and you want to help them avoid it, have them call ATBS, because our program is designed to keep you compliant with the IRS from an income tax standpoint. And we can alleviate all of these issues with our monthly services as long as people participate, send us the required information so we can calculate the industry best quarterly estimates. We can file your taxes on time. We can do all these things to make sure you stay compliant. So, if you're sitting here thinking, holy cow, I got a family member or a friend or a peer or a colleague who, I can just see, I can envision 2, 3, 5 years from now, them falling into the same trap, have them call ATBS. We'll make sure they don't fall into it. Okay.
My favorite story in the tax resolution world of truckers is the IRS did assign a revenue officer to audit the trucking industry. So he randomly pulled one of ATBS truckers' returns as part of the audit, and it was in a group of trucker returns that were done by many other accounting firms, including the biggest name brand tax services we've all heard of. I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
name names. And this revenue officer, after we provided all the documentation on the trucker's return that had been audited, told me point blank that the documentation ATBS provided for the trucker audit was the best that he had seen. His words were, there is no comparison between the ATBS documentation and all the other accounting firms that were auditing for truckers. No comparison.
Yep. It's trucking specific,
It was a
and you're,
trucker specific. I don't want to really mess that word up. Um,
yeah, true.
Audit of the industry, yeah, and I just I thought the revenue officer was great. He really knew trucking. He understood trucking. I was actually impressed with the IRS that they got this guy doing it. And I just was and this was not my negotiation, by the way. This
Right.
was the accounting department at ATBS. This was the tax department at ATBS. This was the finance department. All the departments, meticulous work on that trucker's return. All I did was show it to the
Yep.
revenue officer. So I am not bragging, but I'm really proud to work at ATBS because we're not audited enough, but when we are, it's very enjoyable, as crazy as that sounds. And the
It is.
trucker was very happy.
It is pretty crazy, but that's, the confidence that we have. And we've been doing this for 23 years. We've helped over 150,000 owner operators and independent contractors in 23 years. And, we have 12,000 clients every month who trust us to keep them out of trouble with the IRS and keep them compliant. That's a company that knows trucking, right? Which is really the last thing that we'll say on that. So real quick, Barney, as we're, kind of wrapping up the video and the series here, like I mentioned, previous episode, whatever number it was, 6, we answered some pretty common questions that we get, and that answered most of the submissions that we received. And I could only really count 3 that we haven't answered that weren't able to be answered by the previous episode. The first one was, how do I sign up? Um, Really simple, everybody. You can go to atbs.com. You can submit your contact information to us, and we'll call you, or you can just call up our phone number on there, and then our enrollment team, basically a team of consultants, just to figure out your situation and the programs that are going to be the best fit and the most impactful to you. So, we'll call you, or you can call us. Doesn't matter. Just go to the website. You can find that information. Figured I'd say it. The other one was, I think we kind of alluded to this earlier. Maybe I kind of blew this one up, but one driver said, I hear you guys say 50,000 is this limit, of when you would say a professional like ATBS should help. And he said, can I still do this myself if I owe more than 50,000 and I'm all caught up? What would you say?
Absolutely. If someone has the stomach for it and they'll at least do our coaching, um,
Right, right.
I mean, look, I try to size you up. I'm going to be honest when you're talking to me. If you're a hothead and you're furious and you hate the IRS and you want to scream at them, I'm going to tell you not to call them. You got to
Only
understand,
going to
you're
do
talking
worse.
to yeah, the agent you're talking to doesn't make the rules. Are there agents that are not pleasant at the IRS? Yeah, unfortunately there are. And I would like to yell at them. But most of them are pleasant to work with and want to do what's fair.
Yep.
But they don't make the rules. And yelling at them is the worst thing that you could do. Now, ATBS, unlike other tax resolution places, we don't put fear into truckers that you shouldn't call and you're going to say the wrong thing. We want you to know that you can call, but you have to be respectful because they'll put a note in your file if you're mean,
Right.
And then if you want me to negotiate, then I got to deal with that note and try to clean that up. If you get an agent you don't like, just politely get out of the call. Most agents are nice and they'll go over your account and your options. And we always encourage it. A lot of these tax resolution places try to scare people from talking to the IRS. And I'm going to tell you, some of the truckers that have paid for that, when I call, those places hadn't even called. They
Yep.
hadn't even done any work. And the IRS agent says no one's called with a power of attorney. And that's one reason they don't want truckers to call the IRS and see what's going on. And we don't think that's fair. It should be a transparent process, and you as the trucker should know your business and what's going on with the IRS.
Yeah, and I would just echo the statement. And I think I made it earlier that, you're the client. We work for you. And so if you say, "Hey, I know I owe 250 grand. I'm all caught up and I'm ready to talk to the IRS and figure this out," Barney will happily coach you, in our negotiation coaching training to prep yourself as best you can for that call. We still believe that once your balance is 50 grand or more, your money will go further by having an expert do it for you. But at the end of the day, we're happy to help. So hope that answered your question there. And then the last one was, and this is, well, this would be a challenge to answer, Barney, but I think I would know how you'll answer it. This particular person's really far behind, and so I'm confident that they'll call us, that we're gonna get taxes done. We're gonna get them compliant, and then we're gonna negotiate. We're gonna do all this stuff. And they said, I'm 10 years behind. How long is this process gonna take? It's a loaded question, but I figured I'd open it up and we can answer it as best we can.
Well, we're going to look at that person's financial window now. And we're going to do that because that's what the IRS is going to look at. They're going to look at, all right, where are you right now? There's a very short form. It's actually an IRS form. Don't let it scare you. It's easy. It's called a 433F.
Yep.
And it just helps us get a picture of where you are now. And look, it's like I said earlier, if you own a yacht and you're making millions of dollars, it's going to be really impossible to negotiate a deal. But from that extreme to if you are don't have a lot of money, you have no assets, you don't own a home, maybe you own one broken down car beside your truck, then based on those financials, you're going to have a lot of options with the IRS to cut your taxes and reduce what you owe and how much you need to pay.
Right.
Um, Here's the deal: the IRS isn't stupid, and if they squeeze too hard, they're not going to get anything, and they know that. They've been around a long time, and they used to do that back last century, and it wasn't productive, and they didn't collect money. They've learned over time that if they work with a taxpayer based on the taxpayer situation, and they can do some kind of payment plan, they actually collect more taxes. So it just makes sense.
Yep. So my answer to this question is, if the further behind you are, the longer it takes, and it's impossible to say, right? We have to file at least 10 years worth of taxes, at least from what I'm reading in the comment. Each of those tax returns, if it's done by somebody who knows what they're doing and knows the industry, it's going to have multiple checks and balances to make sure that everything's being done appropriately, correctly, and the right way, because that's half the battle, is making sure that the total balance due, like you talked about earlier, is the minimum amount that should be due. So that takes time. Then it takes time for Barney and his team, or you, to go through and negotiate with the IRS. And then you got to manage this moving forward, which never stops really until you're, retired or you're no longer working. So, if somebody told me, "Hey, I'm 10 years behind," I would tell them we have several months of work ahead of us, which, I mean, that's probably a reality, but it depends upon how quickly you can get this to a reputable company and the time of the year. If you told us on April 14th that, "Hey, I got to file 10 years of taxes, and taxes are, it's April 15th and we're working on current tax years," it's going to take some time. And, if you're that far behind, it'll just take time. So going all the way back full circle, we always talk about taking incremental steps. The most important thing you can do is just start, start filing, start getting those returns done. So let's go to the oldest one, work our way forward. And once they're all caught up and you're compliant, then we can worry about negotiation, because nothing really matters until you're compliant, like we've said so many times.
And if you're someone that's hearing this and saying, yeah, but I've got an IRS letter in my hand telling me I've got to answer in 10 days or they're
Yeah,
going
right.
to, take my firstborn child, this is important to understand. If you get a power of attorney representing you and we call the IRS for a compliance report, something else very important happens on that call. We're letting the IRS know you've retained a professional. That tells them you're taking your situation seriously. And the bottom line is it should buy time, because we can then give the IRS a timeline, a plan that you, working with ATBS, is putting in place to work through your tax returns. And once they hear that timeline, it should take the pressure off.
I agree. So, well, here we are, Barney. So when I talk about, or in my mind, as we've gone through, holy cow, we're probably 5-6 hours deep, into this series, and we've talked about a lot. Honestly, there's only a few takeaways that I have left on a really universal level, right? Which is, number one, you are not alone. And I know we talked about this in the introduction video, first video. You're not alone. There's a lot of people out there who are going through situations similar to yours, and ATBS can help. I mean, you clearly, ATBS can help. We have the knowledge and the resources and the people to get it done. Trust the experts, right? If they don't know trucking, I I just cannot stress enough how important it is that somebody knows trucking, from all the way through, from helping you get compliant, like we talked about, making sure that you're paying as little as you can on the total balance due, then negotiating and knowing the industry, knowing your story and how to negotiate with the IRS, and then staying compliant, which is the hardest part. Pardon me. So if they don't know trucking, I would just urge caution. If you're trying to get out of trouble with the IRS, find somebody who knows the industry that you're in. And then the most important thing that you can do, remember, all else being equal, is get compliant. Just go save video number 2 of this series somewhere and refer to it over time. Utilize a service like ATBS, our Rumble Strip program, to keep your business between the lines and make sure that you are not getting out of trouble with your compliance with the IRS. And above all, just don't lose hope, because you can get out of this. There's a way out. You can and you will get out of debt. Just follow the proven process that we've been hammering on for weeks now, and you will be able to get there. Whether you use ATBS or not, you'll be able to get out of it with the education and knowledge that we have shared with you. But at the end of the day, this is all we do, is help truckers, and ATBS is happy to help. So you just let us know. Barney, what other big, meaty comments do you have left, if any? Because we've picked your brain pretty hard for the past couple of weeks, and just want to see if you have anything left to say.
Well, look, I know these videos remain on the internet for a long time. We're recording this in February of 2021. As of right now, I've never seen the IRS more flexible to negotiate with when you can get through. So
Sure.
that's kind of the problem. Is getting through has been tough, even for us practitioners. But when you can get an agent on the line, I've never heard more flexibility than I do now. My concern, and that's why I'm naming the time of year of this video, is as more Americans are protected with the vaccine and hopefully um, the pandemic subsides and we return to normal, I am cautioning truckers that the IRS is going to be much more aggressive. So if you're hearing this and it's still early spring 2021, there's never been a better time to work things out now and have that footpath started now before we return to the normal IRS, because all indications are they're going to get really aggressive once that happens.
Yeah, it's a great point, Barney. So, there, and we've talked about it. Today is better than tomorrow in general when it comes to getting out of trouble with the IRS, but especially in the current environment. There's a lot of factors. We don't need to go into it, but the reality is there's a lot of things going on that are making the IRS more apt to negotiate today. And so, getting ahead of this now, it would behoove you to do so if you are behind. Um, so yeah, and the last thing for me, Barney, obviously, is to thank everybody for tagging along. We know these videos are not short, they're not sweet, they're not little snippets. it's an investment of people's time to listen and to be a part of this journey with us. So, one thing I would ask everybody is just submit commentary and feedback to us, because, you know, tax resolution in general doesn't change a lot. Obviously, Barney and ATBS are on the forefront of changes that come along, but there are a lot of questions about taxes and trucking, and if you think there are other topics or ideas that ATBS in general should be posting videos and doing webinars and series and things like that about, let us know. We're happy to work through those, whether it's Barney and me or other experts at ATBS. We're happy to do that. And then the last thing for me is really just thank you to truckers. I mean, every day is thank a trucker day at ATBS. It's crazy to think about, Barney, but it's been almost a year since the nationwide lockdown happened with COVID in 2020 in March. And America froze, and truckers just kept moving, man. And the world is forever indebted to our clients and our client base for what they do every single day. So thank you all. The least we can do is help you if you're behind with the IRS, and make sure that we can keep you compliant with the IRS moving forward. So thank you everybody for being a part of this. Barney, any final words before we sign off for this series?
Tom, thank you so much for the time and organization skills you brought to this series. You really encapsulated tax resolution better than anyone I've ever heard. And amen to what you just said, thanking truckers. I thought I knew truckers before the pandemic, but the side of truckers that I've seen, I mean, from truckers losing loved ones and still driving, to being on the front lines of the pandemic and getting food and supplies to the population,
Vaccines.
uh, vaccines, all the necessary. I mean, America would not function without truckers. Of course, will people remember that? Probably not. I think truckers are never going to be appreciated enough. But I thank you, Tom, for bringing that up.
You bet. And
It's really a
ATBS.
pleasure to help truckers. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
absolutely. And this has been a great series. I've loved it, and really thank you for your time. I know, you do this stuff year round, and we're talking in tax season right now. So I know you have a million things going on, but to folks watching, like Barney said, it's a very underappreciated profession, trucking, but not at ATBS. So, we're always happy to help. So just give us a call, reach out on the website, and feel free to share this information with anybody who you think could benefit from it over time. Who knows? It might be outdated tomorrow with new tax laws. You never know.
It's
But
constantly changing. We're going to
that's
have to
true.
do this again.
Yeah, and we will, I'm sure. In some way, shape, or form. And I've been telling Barney we need to start doing beers with Barney like once a month video
Oh, there you
series.
go.
So we'll see. We'll figure something out. But again, thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully, everything that we have presented was valuable to you. We'll sign off. But again, reach out to ATBS if you need help, and let us know if there's other content or series that we can do to help you. But thank you. Take
Drive
care. Drive
safe.
safely. See
Take
ya.
care.